Welcome, everyone. Oh my gosh, I rarely have a mic in front of me. I think I'm going to blow this thing up. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here at Ken Sanders Rare Books for this beautiful event that we created called Literary Libations. And I guess we thought we were going to call it Booze and Books, but Literary Libations sounded so much better and more professional. That joke was funnier in rehearsal, guys. I think it was pretty. What rehearsal? It was fine. Okay, it was fine. I'd like to welcome everyone here to Ken Sanders. My name is Jim Santangelo. I'm with the Wine Academy of Utah. I'm taking care of the libations part tonight. We are joined here with Ken Sanders of Ken Sanders Rare Books. Very nice. We also have Bill Allred of X96 Radio from Hell fame. Yeah.
I love you.
We have Dawson on our production over here. Thank you, Dawson, for that. And then we also have Zoe on camera work on the back. So these guys are, and you want to make, you always want to treat them really well because they put you on film. They put you on camera. You know, they're on the camera. But I'm going to throw it over. We have a beautiful book today, the Edward Abbey, Desert Solitaire, a book that I think we've all had in our lives one time or another.
Jim, if you'll look very closely at the tables, almost everybody brought a copy.
That is amazing. That is absolutely amazing. Well, let's throw it over to you guys, and we'll get us started. But welcome to Literary Libations.
So can you guys all hear me back there just fine? Literary Libations. Well, literary part, you know, look around you. There's a trove of books here that Ken Sanders has collected over the years and would like to sell to you if you'd like to buy them. Ken has an intimate knowledge of the content of most of these books that you see. Ken is the literary part. As to the libations, well, we have access to an astounding amount of knowledge about wine and spirits with Mr. Jimmy Santangelo. He's the proprietor of the Wine Academy of Utah. That's I call him the benevolent despot of the Wine Academy of Utah.com.
Do you have a dictionary here? Because I'm going to be right back. I'm going to look that up. I'm not sure if that's good or bad. Okay. I'll be right back.
So Literary Libations was actually Jimmy's idea, so if it's bullshit, it's his fault. Jim, why don't you talk about the cocktail and what you're going to do with that?
So Edward Abbey, Desert Solitaire, and then Jim has to come up. I get to come up with the author and the book. And Bill, we haven't figured out yet what he does. And Jim has to do the real work of actually designing, making, and mixing the cocktail, Jimmy.
So it's really fun because it's a, like, how do you pair something with a book? You know, you usually have food and wine pairing or rum and chocolate pairing, things like this. Somebody's like, rum and chocolate? You can pair that?
You got some takers there.
Pirate book next time. So it's more of a feeling. And what does Edward Abbey for me means speaks really to the Southwest. Naturally, and the sparkling wine that that I provided you upon arrival, the sparkling wine is a Brut Rosé by Gruet. It's a French family that was driving across the United States and broke down in New Mexico, and they fell in love with the area over the last few days that they were spending there while the car was being repaired, and eventually they moved back there, planted vineyards, and make and produce beautiful sparkling wine, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay. And I thought, what better? I love starting events with sparkling wine, a little bit of bubbly, cleanses the palate. I was joking with folks, you got to wash Saturday off the palate, with some sparkling wine. Sparkling wine's not. Cheers. Yes. Cheers, everyone. Cheers. So this sparkling wine spoke to me because of the producers that are from the area of the Southwest. So it was a natural fit. There you have it, Bill.
All right. We now we're also going to do a cocktail coming up.
Oh yes, I'm going to prepare you a cocktail. I might be you might be hearing some ice and things like that. I hope it's not too distracting. But again,
do you want to talk about that now?
Yeah,
what you're doing?
Yeah, we can do that. This is going to be a Mezcal Negroni. And Mezcal is an agave-based spirit out of Mexico, and usually agave-based spirits are tequila. And agave is like this big bulbous root. We're not making it from the leaves of an agave. We all may have agave in our front yards here in Utah. It's a southwestern desert plant, and it's got these big thorny leaves coming out, and there's hundreds of species of agave. Blue Weber agave is the agave we use out of Jalisco, Mexico, the state down there, and that's what we make tequila out of. Well, you have agave throughout Mexico, and if you go down further south to Oaxaca, there is other types of species of agave, espadín, Mexicano, Pacifico, all these different types that we will still produce a spirit out of, but we can't call it tequila because it's not in that area. But instead of making it like tequila, we actually roast that desert root, and that's where that smokiness comes in. And then in the classic tradition of a Negroni, we have Campari or Cappelletti. It's a red bitter Italian liqueur, and then sweet Italian vermouth, or I'm using a French vermouth because it's a bit more herbaceous. So this cocktail, again, just really came together for me. And these guys, it took a while to convince them. It was they had to taste it over and over and over again.
It's not quite right,
It's
Jim.
not quite right.
You're getting close.
Yeah.
Set them up again.
That's what Bill's. Did you hear that?
No.
That's where you're here. That's what Bill's here for. It's like,
Make mine a double, buddy.
so with that, I'll go ahead and make those and distribute them out. But thank you all for being here, and I look forward to the talk today.
I'd like to. This is a book club essentially, and you're all a part of this. Anytime you want to ask a question or contribute to the discussion, you can do it. We're not going to do like a Q&A. Just from this moment on, anything you want to add or ask, or just please feel free to do it. I'm going to introduce Ken here, and I'm going to do it by reading mostly about it from Wikipedia, and then he'll stop me at various points and say, that's not true. Ken Sanders is an American antiquarian bookseller. It's good so far, right? Well known for his pursuit of book thieves. He organized a sting operation to capture John Charles Gilkey. Do some of you know about this? John Charles Gilkey, major focus of the book called The Man Who Loved Books Too Much, about Gilkey's thefts and Mr. Sanders' detective work that tracked him down and put him in prison.
Coined a term, I called myself the bibliodetective, failing to realize that name amongst my friends would soon denigrate to the book dick.
Ken, the book dick, has been an appraiser on Antiques Roadshow. Ken was raised in Salt Lake City, where he was a serious book collector by the age of 17.
14.
Okay, I'll correct that.
Grade school, really.
Yeah. He founded Ken Sanders Rare Books in 1997. Dream Garden Press in 1980. 1982, he was a founding member of the Fund for Wild Nature, then known as Earth First Foundation.
I'd never heard of the Fund of Wild Nature before.
It was Earth First, right?
No, no.
No?
Why don't you finish your introduction and then I'll talk.
Okay. He's a member of the Antiquarian Booksellers Association of America, and he served on its board of governors for 6 years, during which time he was the security chair.
Book dick.
Ken was a friend of Edward Abbey's. Ed Abbey, American author and essayist, born in Pennsylvania.
He always said home Pennsylvania because Ed loved to collect names on the land, but it was the town next to home.
He was noted for his advocacy of environmental issues. His best-known works, of course, The Monkey Wrench Gang and Desert Solitaire, probably the two most well-known.
Yep.
Abbey. Now, I found this. He was in the military. And he got an honorable discharge somehow because he was a screw-up in the military. And he got his honorable discharge, and tell me if this is true. He put it in an envelope with the words "return to sender" on it and sent it back to the United States government. And he was immediately put on a watch list by the FBI and remained on the watch list his entire life, right?
Yeah, that certainly sounds like a true story. As our friend Trent Harris, the filmmaker, says, just because I made it up doesn't mean it's not true.
That it could not have been.
Words to live by.
Yeah, absolutely. Edward Abbey died in 1989.
March 14th.
Right, of esophageal bleeding. He was only 62. He pretty much drank himself to death.
Yeah, though he had quit the last couple of years, but it's a little too late.
Yeah. Per Abbey's wishes, some of his friends wrapped him up in a blue sleeping bag, packed it with dry ice, loaded Ed into a Chevy pickup truck.
The living Ed.
They stopped at a liquor store, bought 5 cases of beer and some whiskey to pour on the grave, and then they drove off into the desert. They searched for the right spot the entire next day. Finally, they turned down a long road and began digging, and they put Ed in a hole and covered it with a rock. And
No. It's like the scene in Little Big Man. It's a good day to die, except Abbey didn't cooperate. He didn't die.
You told me this.
So they had to fucking put him back in the back of the truck, drive that from the Cape Cabeza Prieta all the way back to Tucson, put him in his writing cabin in the back of the house where he bled out on the couch that night.
And then they took him to the desert.
For the corpse this time.
Well,
his last words were, "Lots of rocks."
Pretty much nobody except those people who were there know where that is.
Not really true anymore, but I take you back to our 60s youth, Bill, and a book by Carlos Castaneda called The Teachings of Don Juan.
A Yaqui way of knowledge.
Would drop psychedelics and peyote and go to Mexico looking for this Mexican sorcerer. They missed the whole point of the books, as do people, whether you knew Ed Abbey like me or didn't. He left a legacy. He wrote 21 goddamn books.
Yeah.
He invented a character in most of those books named, coincidentally, Edward Abbey. Edward Abbey could put himself and make fun of himself and his own foibles and his own personality in a book like few other writers can.
How did talk about how you met Edward Abbey? I wanted to start with this quote from Desert Solitaire, though. Ranger, where is Arches National Monument? I don't know, mister, but I can tell you where it was. How did you meet Ed Abbey?
Wilderness needs no defense, only more defenders. Growth for the sake of growth, the ideology of the cancer cell. A couple of my favorite Abbey quotes. After a misspent youth playing cowboy, printer, and of course omnivorous reader, I was wheeling and dealing comic books in grade school. By junior high school, I was a serious book collector. I was buying Lewis Carroll and Baum books and Edgar Allan Poe, a folio edition of The Raven with Gustave Doré engravings for every quatrain of the poem. By high school, I had a mail order business selling underground comic books like Zap by Robert Crumb. And my ads said you must be 18 or over to buy these comics. Now, I was 15 or 16, but I wasn't buying them. I was selling them.
Yeah, but how did you meet Edward Abbey, Ken?
Well, I'm getting to that, Bill. In 1967.
I don't mean to rush you. I don't.
19. Yeah. That's your department, Jimmy. Keep them flowing. In 1967, I met Steve Jones and Sherm Clow that had started the Cosmic Airplane hippie head shop at 9th and 9th here in Salt Lake City. Within a year's time, they had moved our first head shop to the corner of South Temple and 4th West, a.k.a. the steps leading up to the Delta Center today. Steve was just the Human Ensemble Theater, got their start in the back of the Cosmic. Rocks and Gravel, Smoke Blues Band, they practiced there, got their start. Lots of shit.
Ken, how did you meet Edward Abbey?
Steve published 5 issues of the Electric News. So in 1975, we've jumped 8 years, Bill. Mm-hmm. We just jumped 8 years. I didn't want you to miss it.
Look, well, I just how did you meet Ed Abbey?
Well, Steve Jones said, hey, Bruce Roberts' dad just died and left a bunch of money. He's going to put 50 grand in Cosmic, and I can finally have the bookstore I've always wanted. Will you come and manage it? No. I talked my way into a 3-way partnership with Steve and Bruce, and we spent a year finding a place on First South in the old Film Road district, next door to the Blue Mouse Theater, and just up the road from the Cine Grill restaurant. And one day, this is just not too long after, 1975, coincidentally the same year, Monkey Wrench Gang was published. And one day, Ed Abbey, who was living in Moab at the time, walked into the store. And I recognized him, took him in the back room, and got him to sign all my rare first editions, and lectured him over Hayduke's habit of flinging beer cans out the window to mark the mileage. And despite, Ed took it pretty well. He didn't really have much to say. He certainly didn't try to defend himself or Hayduke for that matter. And in spite of that beginning, we went on to become really good friends.
You did a lot of stuff with him, didn't you?
A lot of environmental activities. 1981.
That's what you call them, environmental activities?
Well, you've heard of euphemisms, haven't you, Bill?
Euphemisms? Yes, I have.
So, Ed, I knew better. I had Ed's phone number. You did not call Edward Abbey. He hated talking on the damn telephone. He didn't. He just listened. So you better have something to say if you called him. So one day the phone rings. Ken, this is Ed. Going down to Lone Rock Campground outside of Lake Powell. Some kind of spring rites. You want to talk about that silly calendar of yours? Meet me there. I'd been trying to talk Ed into publishing a calendar based on his works. I went on to do that for 10 years. Ended up doing 17 different Wilderness National Park calendars lifetime ago. So I drive my old 54 Chevrolet flat black pickup truck to Lone Rock Campground off Lake Powell. There's a bunch of goddamn long-haired rednecks with a VW bus overflowing in black plastic. Who the fuck are you? What the fuck are you doing here? I didn't like their bedside manner.
Language.
I wasn't about to tell them Ed Abbey sent me. So we had a pretty hard standoff for a number of hours till later that evening when Abbey showed up. Once they found out that I was a friend of Ed Abbey's, the founders of Earth First, Dave Foreman, and the rest of the gang, proceeded to tell me of their plan to unfold the blob of plastic and make a 300-foot crack down the face of Glen Canyon Dam.
Now, there's I'd never heard that story until you told me, and you gave me a video about Edward Abbey, and there's video of them doing that.
You won't see me in that video.
But it's remarkable. They throw this sheet of plastic over the dam, and it really does look like a big crack is forming in the face of the dam. It was phenomenal. A brilliant idea, whose ever it was.
Dave Foreman.
Was Dave Foreman?
And the rest of there were 5 founders. And Louisa Wilcox, an early adapter, was there. This hot shit woman climber. She'd do these Everest trips. Not to summit, mind you. She'd go up to 20, 25,000 feet and haul trash down.
Mm-hmm. So we should sort of start focusing on the book, Desert Solitaire.
Okay, all right. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I know all of you are familiar with it. Many of you brought copies.
I think every table here has got at least one copy.
So it is very well known. But would you think that Edward Abbey would like that to be his most well-known work?
No, there was a time period where Ed Abbey called his agent up and said he was so goddamn tired of this book. He said, they only want to pick quotes to license from Desert Solitaire. And for several years, he shut it down, would allow nothing. It was like a child that had become too much of a favorite. And
how did he feel about the Monkey Wrench Gang?
He met it as a comedy. Both books, Desert Solitaire, 1968. It was from his time as a park ranger, as you mentioned earlier, Arch's Monument in the 50s. It was published in 1968. Between Solitaire and Monkey Wrench Gang, he did some picture books, and he did his third novel, Black Sun, set in and around the Grand Canyon. And both of those books, Desert Solitaire in 68 and Monkey Wrench Gang in 75, failed to sell out their 5,000 copy first editions.
What happened?
They were left with remainder marks on the back.
So what happened?
They endured. Abbey endured, and these books have gone on to sell millions of copies. Next year, which is, I believe, coming up pretty quick.
Yes, it is.
Will be the 50th anniversary of the Monkey Wrench Gang. And for the 10th anniversary, do the math, I commissioned the underground cartoonist Robert Crumb to illustrate. Abbey fought it. He didn't like Crumb's artwork. And I agree with him. Robert Crumb could not have illustrated any other book that Ed Abbey wrote except this one.
Why did Crumb didn't want to do it either at first, did he? You talked him into it, right?
Robert had never heard of Ed Abbey. I sent him a paperback. He would have done it for nothing. He'd call me up on the phone. Is it true in Mr. Abbey's book that are there people in real life that actually go out and perform some of the activities he describes in that book? Yes, Mr. Crumb, there are, and they do. And the autograph party in Arches that year, that spring.
I think it's remarkable that you were, and I'd known you for some time before I found out that you were responsible for the illustrations, getting it done, and they've become almost as iconic as the book itself. You don't think of Monkey Wrench Gang without those illustrations. I think it's remarkable.
So I see Jimmy is a. I want to read one thing before we start in our cocktails, Bill.
Okay.
May I?
Yeah. Yes, by all means.
You guys.
Perhaps you should wet the whistle.
Oh, sure.
Here, I'll just hand you that. I'll rotate it out. And Bill, yourself. Sir, I can set it here.
Thank you. Well, stick. You can do it.
Oh, and I apologize for my swearing, but in my defense, back to Monkey Wrench Gang for one second. Bonnie Abzug, the only female member of the gang, gets sick and tired of Hayduke and his constant swearing. And she's complaining to Doc Sarvis. And Hayduke, in his defense, says, well, shit, piss, fuck, Doc. I can't talk if I can't swear. So I'm sure you've all read this.
That's your defense?
It was Hayduke's defense. I'm borrowing it.
He's borrowing it, okay.
So, from the original introduction, 1968.
I knew you could do it.
Finally, a word of caution. Do not jump into your automobile next June and rush out to the canyon country, hoping to see some of that which I have attempted to evoke in these pages. In the first place, you can't see anything from a car. You've got to get out of the goddamn contraption and walk. Better yet, crawl on hands and knees over the sandstone and through the thorn bush and cactus. When traces of blood begin to mark your trail, you'll see something. Maybe. Probably not. The second place, most of what I write about in this book is already gone or going under fast. This is not a travel guide, but an elegy, a memorial. You're holding a tombstone in your hands, a bloody rock. Don't drop it on your foot. Drop it on something big and glassy. What do you got to lose?
Very good. Abbey at Arches. At the time, a national monument, not a national park. He sees the decline of the ecosystem and the culture around him. He doesn't really offer any ways to stop it, does he?
No, but Abbey...
Your microphone.
Abbey foresaw the coming of industrial tourism. And as he left Arches, famously at the end of that book, he picked up several miles worth of survey stakes and burnt them. Not that it kept the new road from coming in. And he also regretted, in Desert Solitaire, he names landscapes inside the maze. Countless number of people from wherever they came from in this country and the world read Desert Solitaire and hitchhiked to the American West like Ed Abbey himself first did.
Mm-hmm. And he must have felt awfully conflicted about that.
Oh, baby, yeah. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't, though. We did some river trips in the 80s, so I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. It was never meant to just be me and Ed trips. We both invited other people, but somehow back then nobody wanted to go run rivers in fucking November of each year. One year my friend Sarah came. Ed always had more time. So usually we always would have one of our buddies like Richard Quist at Moki Mac dump us off at Mineral Bottom on the Green River, which is a great canoe takeout if you put in at Green River itself. And we would rendezvous down at Spanish Bottom and then would tie his stupid sport yak boat to my... I had this, don't ask me why, a war surplus boat that was 20 feet long with 24-inch tubes, and I rode it with 11 feet ash oars.
Why did you have that boat?
I told you not to ask me that question, Bill.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
So we would row Cataract Canyon, and there's no, you pretty much, the water is colder than hell.
Yeah.
And if you screw up, and the big drops, I don't care if you ever run the big drops, you better be scared of them. I don't care what water level it is. The giant holes turn into giant rocks.
Yeah.
That's the major difference in big drop 2 and 3. So we would just go down there and have a really fun time climbing up there. But the story I wanted to tell you, the one time with Sarah, they were really giving me a bad time. We had climbed up the river, Spanish Bottom Trail, up to the doll's house, and spent the day out in a part of the maze called Ernie's Country. And I was trying to find the slot canyon that I'd stumbled into a couple of years before. Needless to say, I couldn't find it. So we're back up on top. We still got a few miles to get back down to the boats and the river. And the sun's kind of setting. Ed's stroking his beard and looking out to the south there. Ken, you remember that scene in Monkey Wrench Gang where Hayduke winches his Jeep down the cliff? This is about how I imagined that country looked when I wrote that scene. I said, Abby, you goddamn fucking liar. You've never ever been here before in your life.
He's a good writer.
He admitted it. Yeah. A sign of a very good writer.
What's amazing to me is, Jim.
Shall we raise a glass? Everyone has a cocktail. So, how's it going so far, huh? All right.
Any questions, please ask them. Anything you want to ask, you can.
Mezcal Negroni, enjoy. Someone asked me the ratio when I was going by. On the back side of your card there, on your, we do have the ingredients. This is a classic recipe. My Nana taught me. She taught me how to make drinks. And
what age were you?
I was about 7 or 8, and
well,
I was always tall as a kid, so I could reach stuff.
Yeah, and she didn't have to do the work.
And she didn't have to do the work. So she taught me 2 very valuable things. The first is when you make a cocktail, it's the 1,000 count, right? It's a count. It's a 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 as it pours. And then this drink is a 2-to-1 to a 1 ratio, so it's 2 parts mezcal, 1 part of the Cappelletti, and 1 part of the sweet Italian vermouth or the French vermouth. And she would have made this though. As smart of a woman as she was, her counting was a little slow, so it was 1,000, 2 1,000. So she batched her drinks out, and the second thing, so her drinks were usually quite strong. And the second thing is how to cook with. If you've ever cooked with wine before, has anyone deglazed a pan, or you need a little white wine for something? The key, and I've taken this ever since. The key to cooking is it's 1 for the dish and 2 for the chef.
You guys from the
More
same
math.
family?
More math.
More math. Yeah. Cheers.
Let's see now. Where were we? Talking about. Let's talk a little bit more about arches and Moab. There's a part in Desert Solitaire where he talks about he'd go into town and go to some of the beer bars there. And the only people in the bars were locals,
Uranium miners,
and uranium miners, and some
cowboys,
and some engineers from out of town.
woodies.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, he said a civil engineer with unquestioning dedication to his work is the most dangerous man in the world. But he talked about the political and cultural implications of uranium mining. It's about to start up again in serious ways.
It definitely is already happening.
What do you talk about that a
Our
little?
friend Scott Carey, I don't know that much about it. Scott Carey spent the last 2 years building this home off the grid down out in the wilds, kind of south, I think, of the old town of La Salle, on the south side of the La Salle Mountains. And he took him weeks of driving around. The sound just started happening. And apparently it's a sound coming from deep in the ground from one of the uranium mines that they've opened there. And it's 24/7.
Yeah, and the native people down there in the Four Corners area, the Navajo, they're not happy about it.
No, not from what I've heard, no.
Yeah. Ed Abbey talks about going to Havasu, the village down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. It's over on the Arizona. Anybody here been to Havasu? It's really remarkable, isn't it? I've been there.
It's not at the bottom, Bill.
Well, no, it's not. It's a side canyon. It's a side canyon. What's what?
What kind of sound is it?
Wallapai Hilltop Village.
They were
Havasupai Indians.
The sound was mining. They're mining equipment.
He described it as a weird sound he'd never ever heard before.
They mine 24 hours?
Yeah.
It's coming deep from underground. I don't know what it's something.
It was ghosts or
Stuck. We need Carrier here to answer that question.
But you go to Havasu, and it really is. I remember when I first went there.
From the top,
Yeah.
from Wallapai Hilltop.
Yeah.
I think.
That
14 miles.
There's just, I think,
You can walk, donkey, or of course you can helicopter.
helicopter.
They brought Bob Marley's mother in for a concert there about how to ride. They're all Rastafarians these days.
You walk up to the first. We got there. It's just a big parking lot, and somebody said, "First time here?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Welcome to paradise." And you walk up to the edge of this parking lot, and then you go, "Oh." It's a long. I think it's 2 miles straight down, and then it's another 8 miles to the village, something like that. And it is just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place to be. And you can hike all the way down that canyon to the Colorado.
Havasu Creek.
Yeah.
The blue-green water. So
And egrets and herons. It's paradise. But so when Ed Abbey talks about going to Havasu, he hears about it because he's at the Grand Canyon. He and some friends are about to push a rubber truck tire off the edge and down into the canyon. I don't know what to make of that.
Ed used to do that a lot, actually. I'm pretty sure you'd kill people these days.
Yeah. And not to mention, who wants to find an old rubber truck tire at the bottom of the Grand Canyon?
I think he switched to rocks after that.
Oh, good. Ed Abbey, let's talk a little bit about Monkey Wrench Gang, in that this is a very cinematic novel.
Which is yet to ever be made.
Yeah,
50
why
years.
is that?
There's a slush pile of scripts mounted up like a...
And I would assume Ed would have loved to have a movie made of it.
Yes. That's too long a story. In my opinion, it's never going to get made now. The principals in it, Ed Pressman Films, Gary Burden. Plus, it's not a contemporary story anymore. It's 50 years. You'd have to do it as some kind of historical look back thing. It just, in my opinion, it's never ever going to happen. Ed got pissed as hell when he realized, because the movie people at one time early on paid him $5,000 to do a screenplay. He found in they were bringing in people and paying them $50,000 for screenplays. Boy, did he get mad about that. Though he used to joke, I hope they never make that movie. I can live off the film option rights the rest of my life. Ed didn't live a lavish lifestyle at all. He never made any money.
He wasn't a wealthy man, no.
His print runs of his books were 5,000 copies until Fool's Progress, when the dumbass, he knew he was dying and wouldn't tell anybody, and he screwed up. He taught at the U of Arizona, and he screwed up his health insurance. So he dies with his wife and 2- and 4-year-old with no health insurance. And by the way, back to that burial scene earlier, no one, Peacock and Leffler and Dupuy,
those guys that buried him,
and Clark's brother, who was a medical doctor, by the way, they didn't get a death certificate. They just buried him in the desert. Boy, there was some hot tempers, but they ultimately decided they're not going after the widow and the kids. That wouldn't look good.
So that's nice of them.
Well, what was nice of them, when they found out he died without health insurance, every one of the doctors and hospitals, medical people forgave the bills.
There is a movie that was made based on one of his books.
Two.
Oh, there are two?
Made for TV and a real movie. Kirk Douglas.
Right, and what's Lonely Are the Brave, is that it?
Yes, they changed the title.
What was the book called?
The Brave Cowboy.
The Brave Cowboy.
But my buddy Jim Pepper and I, the book still long out of print and hardback, Jim Pepper and I published 20, 30 years ago a hardbound Kirk Douglas edition of it that we managed to get Mr. Douglas to write an intro to, and it's photoplay scenes from the film. And his intro is hilarious because he gives this list of 20 titles that they were going to use. And trust me, Lonely Are the Brave is a better title than My Gun, My Life, 2 exclamation points. Oh, boy, they had some real stinkers in there.
It's not a bad movie, as I recall. I haven't seen it for years.
Gina Rowlands, Kirk Douglas, George Kennedy, and Archie Bunker is driving the load of bathroom fixtures that runs over Jack Burns and his horse Whiskey in the final scene. And two facts about the book, the first edition versus the movie, versus all the... unless you've read that, the book and the movie difference is the original Brave Cowboy, Jack Burns, dies. All the reissues.
That's the character.
Yes. But he lives in all... They changed it in the film because it was too much of a downer.
Yeah.
And the next biggest thing about the movie is the book is brilliant and the movie is brilliant. But in 1962, they weren't... This is right out of the Hollywood blacklist year. Dalton Trumbo was the director. It was Kirk Douglas had gotten him work on brought him back from dead by giving him work.
Yeah.
And they were not... Why the hell is Jack Burns doing all this crazy fucking shit and busting out of jail? Well, if you read the book, you know it's because he's a draft dodger. You couldn't be a draft dodger in the 1950s, for God's sake. Yeah. And you couldn't be one in the movie. Yeah. And he isn't. So why in God's name in the movie is he running around doing all this crazy shit?
Well, he didn't know. He didn't like being in jail.
Yeah.
That's why I would bust out. I don't like being there. I saw a note somewhere that Edward Abbey and Cormac McCarthy, who just died recently, Blood Meridian, No Country for Old Men, they were pals and friends. They knew acquaintances, but it said that they were hatching a plan to surreptitiously reintroduce wolves into the ecosystem.
I've never heard that, but I'm not saying it's not true. I've never heard it. Ed Abbey introduced me in the 1980s to an author I'd never heard of. He gave me a paperback copy of Blood Meridian and said, "You got to read this book." Ed wrote to Cormac a fan letter, and Cormac wrote him back and sent him an inscribed first edition of Blood Meridian. I had it in my hands at a book fair, and I could have bought it, but I couldn't because it was then $25,000.
Didn't have the cash.
I couldn't afford it.
Yeah.
It sold for twice that eventually. And of course, now from Vanity Fair, we're learning, oh, gee, another creative male type with maybe kind of a checkered background, having a young
Cormac
16-year-old muse. Wow.
Yeah.
But one thing I do want to, we don't have time to go into that, but
Okay.
I can't think of the woman's name. She's 66 years old now.
The one who was 16-year-old.
16 years old. She shows up at a motel. She'd had a really, really hard life, and especially with men and family. She was in a foster home. She shows up at a motel in Tucson with a 6-gun strapped on her hip to sneak in the showers at the pool to take a shower so she could do it safely. And she sees this guy sitting by the pool. He looks familiar. She goes home. She's reading like Sutri. Yeah, that's him. That's the picture on the book.
It's Cormac McCarthy.
So she strides up to him, the 16-year-old girl, the next day with the gun on her hip. And he looks at her and said, "Are you going to shoot me?" She said, "No, I want your autograph." I'm not trying to justify Cormac McCarthy's behavior here in any shape or way. But in that Vanity Fair article, she states categorically, this is her story, not my story, not Cormac McCarthy's story, that Cormac McCarthy saved my life. Mm-hmm. It's her story. I think she gets to tell it. Whatever kind of story, whatever we want to think of her, him, or the author, for that matter, those are different stories. And every book from Blood, he forged her birth certificate and took her to Mexico with him on the trip that became Blood Orchid. Every book he wrote from meeting her on, he kills this girl, young woman, off. And she did complain to him about killing her dog off in one of the books.
Ed Abbey, questions arise in any of your, in any of this? Anything you want to, anything you want to talk about? Nothing? Questions? Comments? Observations? Anybody?
Was he when she was 16?
Pardon?
How old was he when she was 16?
Cormac McCarthy?
He was 44.
44. He was a mature gentleman.
One question arose. What is the oldest book you have here? I know you have this next floor, the rare book room. What's the oldest print to date book that you have here?
Jim, if you only knew how the two questions I find the most boring in my life.
You've managed to
Okay, no,
You're welcome.
you got one of the three.
You're welcome.
Have you read all of these books?
Have you read all these books? What's the most expensive?
My answer now has become yes. It's a lie, but it's
sure.
simpler. 2, what's the most valuable book you have here? At least you didn't ask that one.
Yeah.
And what's the oldest book? The gentleman in the black cap is leaning on it in the bookcase underneath you. Or behind you, I mean, sorry.
Wow.
It's a large book. Can you see it? It's
Our
very
Vanna
large.
White, our Vanna White.
Should be right in the corner.
Beauty.
And it is a 1564 edition of Aristotle. It's damn near 500 years old. Not quite.
Have you read that book, Ken?
It's in Latin, Bill.
Oh. So, have you
Maybe
read
it's Greek.
of course.
It's all Greek and Latin to me.
That's right.
I can barely handle this language.
You do fine. I made note of this quote from Desert Solitaire. There is a cloud on my horizon, a small dark cloud, no bigger than my hand. Its name is progress. Kind of sums it up. When was the last time you were at Arches? They have, what do they have, metered time?
It's not meters.
What is it? It's you have to sign up for time to get in.
Yeah.
The line of cars going in.
You can
and
still
out.
sneak in, Bill. Come
There are ways. It's. I guess. Is there anything else we need to cover? No questions.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Fine.
Here we go.
So in one of the stories, Edward talked about the father and son that were out exploring, and some guy came in a helicopter and ended up like killing the father, getting him in the truck, pushing him off the cliff, but he gets stuck on the truck and also goes off the cliff, and the son tries to escape and ends up floating down a river, but everybody dies. So I was wondering,
This is in Desert
Solitaire?
Solitaire?
Was this like a story that was?
I don't remember.
I don't remember the story.
Really? Okay, I'll find it.
Please.
I'll find it.
Okay.
Hold, please.
It's the story where from East Texas, the family moves to prospect for uranium.
And the wife like has an affair with the rich.
Ingram or Graham.
Yes.
Well, Charlie Steen was the big Texas. Charlie Steen was the big Moab, Texas millionaire uranium miner. He was dirt poor. He had family of 5, 6 kids. Him and ML, his wife,
Built that house up on the.
they built the big palace that's a restaurant now. It used to be on the very north edge of town. Now it's like central Moab because Moab's gone.
This one dies. The episode. He doesn't make it.
Well, no,
funny.
Charlie Steen lived for a long time. He's dead now.
That's funny. I just don't remember that story.
I don't know. I'm just libating over here.
But Bill, I have one more reading I want to do from.
Okay.
How are we doing on time?
We're fine. Hey, it's your store.
So, a long time ago, I published this book of essays about Ed Abbey. It's got other people's opinions on him, from Barry Lopez to Wendell Berry to Gary Snyder. Let me find the table of contents here. Here we go. Oh, now the pages are fuzzy, Bill. William Eastlake, Richard Shelton, Diane Wachowski, others. So in Wendell Berry, at the end of Wendell's essay, which is really, Wendell Berry and Edward Abbey were very, very good friends for decades, but they never, ever met. Wendell showed up at Ed's house in Tucson one day. Ed wasn't around. In '88, when he was touring for his last book and dying, he called Wendell up and said, "I'm coming to Kentucky to visit him." Called him back. He was too sick to go. But the quality, so here's Wendell Berry on Edward Abbey. But the quality in him that I most prize, the one that removes him from the company of the writers I respect and puts him in the company, the smaller company of the writers I love, is that he sees the gravity, the great danger of the predicament we are now in. He tells it unswervingly, and he defends unflinchingly the heritage and the qualities that may preserve us. I read him, that is to say, for consolation, for the comfort of being told the truth. There's no longer any honest way to deny that a way of living that our leaders continue to praise is destroying all that our country is and all the best that it means. We are living even now among punishments and ruins. For those who know this, Edward Abbey's books will remain an indispensable solace. His essays and his novels, too, are antidotes to despair. Love that line.
Did you find it?
Yes, it's in chapter called Rocks.
The chapter in Desert Solitaire called Rock.
There's
Basically a story of this woman ends up having an affair with the rich Mr. Graham. And unbeknownst to her husband at the time, who may also have a son, and Mr. Graham helicopters into wherever they are, I think during the San Rafael swell, and tells the husband this. And of course the husband gets upset, he shoots the husband, the boy runs away, the husband doesn't quite die, so the husband's like crawling around. Mr. Graham hasn't killed him, so he decides, and flood comes, he gets carried away, and ends up dying. So my question was, well, if everybody died, how did anybody know about this story?
That's a good question. I don't know about the story, and I read the book at least 10 times, but it's been a while. This is what memory does to you when you get old. I honestly have no memory of that chapter. I'm amazed.
She ends up getting this amazing settlement. She's brilliant. They try to give her some support money, and she's
Wow.
So she ends up getting a nice settlement because I think she was on
She was the sole bride.
yes.
My answer to that, and now I'm starting to come back to me. I vaguely remember that. My answer to that anecdote is, how did anybody know about it? Because Edward Abbey made it up. You know, he just made it up.
It was so detailed that I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, it was Edward Abbey saying, I've got a really good idea for a story here, and I'm going to stick it right here in this book. And I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Writer's prerogative.
Yeah, pretty sure that's what it is.
To requote Trent Harris, just because I made it up doesn't mean it's not true.
Anything else that we can't answer? Yeah,
We'll make something up.
yeah.
I struggle sometimes trying to know, like, what would Ed want me to do about arches and natural lands and everything? Because he's, like, harder to understand than the typical, like, cheerleader, like, rah-rah, join an organization, give money, plant a tree, like,
Recycle your plastic. You know.
throw your beer cans out the window.
Well, Ed considered that recycling. He didn't do it in the back roads or in the wilderness. He did it on highways. I'm not trying to defend him or speak for him, but I know this for a fact.
You knew him certainly better than I knew him. But I would say that he probably doesn't have any answer for you, because he is a prophet of gloom and doom. He writes beautifully about this stuff, but he doesn't leave much of a ray of hope anywhere.
However, I think he would say to you, get your ass out of your car, get on your feet or on a horse, and see the world that way.
Sure. Yeah.
And don't ask where the Coke machine is, because there's not one in Louisville.
But you're not going to turn it back. You cannot turn back what's the machine that's moving. You just can't. You can't turn back what's happened. You can. You go in your car and you go to Arches, and then you make a 2-mile hike and you go see, Delicate Arch, which I consider it's some alien. This was their playground, and it's just some cosmic joke they left behind.
It was the portal where
Let's
they
go-
entered.
yeah.
The portal where they entered.
Yeah,
It's definitely
let's
a
go.
portal.
We're going to go mess around and make all these really cool rock formations, and then we're going to leave. You people figure it out. So, anything else? No.
Let me do an inquiry with the folks out there. Clearly, we're readers, but who reads a book a month? A month, one book a month. Okay. Who tries to do 2 a month? 2 a month. Okay. 1 a week. 1 a week.
Yeah.
There's a trend where people try to do motivate yourself to read by a number of books a year. Okay, no, okay. And do you read on a Kindle or which is great because it's convenient, or the texture, the book itself? Yeah. There's something about that, right? Yeah. But I'll tell you, Kindles are great because they're in any light or no, that's good. Yeah. What I had a question of if there was a book that you feel that would make a great movie. I know we touched on that a little bit with Edward Abbey, but in general, is there a book that you come across you're like, this would be an amazing movie?
I don't think like that.
Okay, fair.
prefer
Anybody else
books.
have a book that you're like, you read it and it would make a great movie? Okay.
Or I just reread a book. It's by an author his name is John Crowley. Do you know who that is? and he wrote a book called Little Big. It's very unusual, and I've read it like 3 times, and it's as unusual the third reading as was the first reading. And I think, how could somebody should try to make a movie out of this? But I don't know how the hell you would, because it's so odd. You know, so
Monkey Wrench Gang has been under option since 1975. So that burnt me out on that sort of thing. It's a perfect movie.
Yeah.
it would be a perfect
It'd be
movie.
a great movie.
So
But,
I do.
but not now. You're right. It's past its day.
Well, maybe it could be made, but
Maybe
we'll see. So Ed Abbey died in '89. In the spring of '88, his last book of essays, One Life at a Time, Please, came out. Most people haven't read it. It's a real hodgepodge of essays, but it's got a number of good ones in it. And I'm just going to read you the intro part. This is Edward Abbey talking about what a writer's job is, what his job is. It's called, I'm just reading the intro, mind you. It's the whole essay holds up. A writer's credo. It is my belief that the writer, the freelance author, should be and must be a critic of the society in which he lives. It is easy enough and always profitable to rail away at national enemies beyond the sea, at foreign powers beyond our borders, and at those within our borders who question the prevailing order. Easy, and it pays. Ask the official guardians of Soviet literary morality. But the moral duty of the free writer is to begin his work at home, to be a critic of his own community, his own country, his own government, his own culture. The more freedom the writer possesses, the greater the moral obligation to play the role of critic. If the writer is unwilling to fill this part, then the writer should abandon pretense and find another line of work. Become a shoe repairman, a brain surgeon, a janitor, a cowboy, a nuclear physicist, a bus driver. Whereof one fears to speak, thereof one must be silent. Far better silence than the written word used to shore up the wrong, the false, the ugly, the evil, whenever necessary. I'm failing it. Whenever necessary, the writer must be willing to undertake the dangerous and often ridiculous and sometimes martyr-like role of hero or heroine. That's all I ask of the author, to be a hero, appoint himself a moral leader, wanted or not. I believe that words count, that writing matters, that poems, essays, and novels, in the long run, make a difference. If they do not, then in the words of my exemplar, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the writer's work is of no more importance than the barking of village dogs at night. The hack writer, the temporizer, the toady, and the sycophant, the journalistic courtier. And what is a courtier but a male courtesan? All those in the word trade who simply go with the flow, who never oppose the rich and powerful, are no better, in my view, than Solzhenitsyn's village dogs. The dogs bark, the caravan moves on.
Thanks for being here. If you'd like to participate in more of this, we're planning to do these on a maybe monthly basis. We're considering another book for late in December.
We are doing Dorothy Parker.
Dorothy Parker.
She was one of the few female... Dorothy Parker was one of the few female members of the famous Algonquin Club of New York City, a lot of famous New York celebrities, and she was a book review writer for The New Yorker.
And what's the name of her book?
The book we'll focus on is The Portable Dorothy Parker. She wrote a dozen or so books before committing suicide.
So if you'd like to be, or we'd like you all to suggest things too, to talk about books that you'd like to talk about here. And you can reach us by sending email to, what's your email, Ken?
Books at kensandersbooks.com.
Books at kensandersbooks.com. Or you can do the Let's Go Eat Show.com
And
or wineacademyofutah.com.
Which is on the back of the
Well, let me ask you a question. How did people find out about this? Was it social media? Social media? Was it Instagram post? Facebook? Any Facebook? Word of mouth? Yeah. Was it on the radio at all? Anybody on the radio? Sorry,
I don't
Bill.
think we paid for that. We didn't pay for that.
Oh, I didn't. I think I did
They would have
once.
tried to
maybe a
charge
minute.
me for it.
Yeah, they would have. Yeah.
Jim, it sold out before we even started.
We
our
even
promo
had a
on it.
chance. But thank you so much for the support today. The doing this Literary Libations, two fabrics of our community coming together to weave just a beautiful story. And thank you for being a part of it.
We want to thank the Leonardo, of course, the wineacademyofutah.com, the Let's Go Eat and Drink Show. Dawson Dow is the producer
Thank you.
of Literary
Big
Libations.
Thank you, everyone.
Technical and
Thanks,
visual
Zoe.
assistance by Zoe Kismet. Support from Ken Sanders Rare Books provided by Natalie and Isla and Kevin. They moved chairs and tables around and did a lot of work today.
Worked hard.
And Chef Deb from the...
Yes, Chef Deb doing the
from
charcuterie. And let's thank, I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining us today, because without you, this would have been way too much mezcal and sparkling wine for just us to be able to drink. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, thank you.
Literary Libations is a presentation of the Let's Go Eat and Drink Show in association with the Wine Academy of Utah, Ken Sanders Rare Books, and the Leonardo Museum at Library Square in Salt Lake City. For more information on the Wine Academy of Utah, it's wineacademyofutah.com. Discover exhibits and programs offered by the Leonardo at theleonardo.org. Ken Sanders Rare Books is an eclectic bookstore located inside the Leonardo Museum and can be found at kensandersbooks.com. And for the Let's Go Eat and Drink Show, search your favorite podcast app. And that about does her. I'm Zach Caton, and as the late Paul Harvey used to say, good day.